Okay, thank you very much. Okay. When was a time that you felt like you belonged? Whether to a friendship group, workplace, community, sporting club or family, the urge to belong and feel accepted is an innate human instinct and an innate human need. We've used a variety of strategies and activities to create a sense of belonging for our students at our school, Milpera State High School. Question is, how do you foster a sense of belonging to students from all over the world with a huge variety of languages, backgrounds and cultures? It is a challenge to create a sense of belonging in a typical classroom at Milpera. Today we want to begin our presentation by briefly sharing one way for not only how we helped create a sense of belonging outside the classroom, but how to make this sense of belonging feel more authentic. We hope that you find this activity can be applied in a multitude of situations, not just with students who are learning English. So for some brief context, all our students at our school, Milpera State High School, are recently arrived refugees and migrants, and one of the ways we tried fostering this sense of belonging to the wider Australian community was by engaging with Australian Year 6 students at St Peter Chanel Primary School in the Gap. Initiated by classroom teachers Margaret Sockhill and Tina, the St Peter's students undertook a unit on migrants, refugees and migration to Australia. Then both Milpera and St Peter's students wrote letters to each other, which is a great chance for writing to have authentic purpose and audience. Next, St Peter's hosted Milpera students at their primary school and vice versa. Milpera hosted St Peter's. Margaret and I used the following activity on your table as an icebreaker for the Milpera and St Peter's students to help foster finding a shared connection and belonging between the students. So now comes everyone's favourite part of a presentation, which is audience interaction. So with the person sitting next to you, can you work together to fill out the sheet? So it's one sheet between two. So introduce yourselves to each other, find out the things that you both like. It could be food, it could be sport, it could be a hobby. What do you both have? It could be a brother or sister, it could be a pet, it could be the same eye colour, same hair colour. And when you finish the first page, turn over the page and then join with the rest of the people at your table. Okay? So 2 minutes on the first one, 2 minutes, and then we'll join together in a big group. Okay. Alright guys, sorry to stop you there. I know that hopefully it's something that you can find you could use yourself. As there was a good question about, would you do this with kids who have just arrived? Well, no. When we did this exchange with St Peter's, it was when Milpera students were about 20 weeks into the English program, so their English was not great, but enough to keep up with a conversation like that. Okay. And it's just a great way to kind of find common ground about things. It's funny how you can find common ground even with the things you don't like. For example, talking at movies was something that we both kind of agreed was something that we don't enjoy. People who talk on the quiet carriage on the way that's universally disliked, I think. Okay. But just to kind of give you some further context for us. This is the focus of our presentation, which is learning and thriving, and how to. So Milpera, being a small school of about 243 students at Chelmer in Brisbane, many of our students come from traumatic backgrounds, such as war or refugee camps, and just even the stress of migrant students from moving from a familiar environment to an alien and different one can be overwhelming and distressing. At Milpera, an initiative was started to find ways we could further enhance students' learning and thriving. The initiative came from the staff, who were the stakeholders. Okay? And we wanted to find ways to make our students not just survive, but thrive. So this whole process began as a bottom-up approach through our professional learning community, or PLC, and then became the focus of Milpera's staff's professional development. This was a whole school approach, and our wonderful bilingual teacher aides were interviewed about belonging to Milpera and can help further illustrate the type of learning environment that we were trying to create. So a brief little video.
My name is John Deng. I'm a community liaison officer here. Milpera is very unique. It's a very unique school in terms of how it relates to the families, the community. Milpera's teachers and Milpera people visit home. They call home most of the time. They translate things to the parent. So parents get the really touchy relationship from the school. The school is a small school. It is so much involving parents in anything they do. So parents are part and parcel of the school community.
The Samoan word for belong is awai. It means join. Part of Milpera is it is safety. It's caring. It looks like second family.
Yeah, as I said, it's like Milpera is a foundation for my own children. Milpera is part of my family because I'm part in Milpera and they consider my children as their children.
I think whatever the teachers, they can expect the children, they come from different culture, different backgrounds, and many of them, they come from severe situations.
I draw when I play. It reminds me playing with my friend in South Sudan. I feel happy.
I belong to my family and to Milpera.
I belong to my mommy, and it belonged to me. Like I belong to Milpera when I play soccer.
I think I belong to Milpera and my friend in here in Australia.
And I come to first Gold Coast, and I come to change to Brisbane, and I come to Milpera, and I belong.
I belong to school in my home. It makes me real happy when I'm with the people, and it makes me feel happy.
Because I got new friends and new teachers, like teaching and making us to understand.
Whenever the teachers, they can accept them and do balancing between what they had and what they start to be here, this has helped the student to be belonging.
Yeah, to me, I see Milpera State High School as a light because, for example, like today, when I was coming from home, it is my child who was acting as an interpreter for me. It is a key and a light, this school, and it is different from other schools.
My name is Philippa Burtcourt. Everyone calls me Philly. I am a teacher aide here, but the teachers, the staff, the admin, they're really so respectful, so nurturing, and really interested in their education and them learning as best as they can. They really want them to feel like this is, your school too. It's not just our school, it's your school. You're a part of this. You help us help you.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I think we've gone after 12. So just to recap, the rest of this presentation now is going to be on this Learning and Thriving project. We're going to focus on these two key strategies of joyous classrooms and belonging. We're going to talk to you around the leadership that we use to implement these projects, and we're going to finish with two joyous activities, one around consistent language for classrooms, and finally a gratitude giving in a donut circle. Now, I know half the people in the room already have a little bit of knowledge about Milpera, so I'm going to skim. It is an on-arrival school for students to learn English, and all of our students have a migrant or refugee background. The students only come to our school for periods of between 6 and 18 months, but always there's exceptions to that rule. Our students are Year 6 age to Year 12 age, so they are between 11 and 18. We say that we've got 3 functions at the school. We've got to educate, nurture, receive and welcome the students, and manage their transitions to other schools. And all of this builds into a student-centred approach. And I always consider that we have the greatest luxury of all schools because we have this student-centred approach. And Ollie's just going to talk to you a little bit about that.
So, student-centred learning. Having a holistic, student-centred approach. What it means is that you focus on the student's strengths, okay? Classroom experts, okay? A lot of the students are bringing expertise with them already, but we can't really see it because of the language barrier sometimes. So we've got these language support structures to kind of help bring that expertise out. Okay, we've got language, so L1 assistants, that's like their first language assistants, so that could be bilingual teacher aides who, so for significant cultural groups in our school, we'll have teacher aides that speak, whether it's Thai or Karen or Swahili, and that can kind of, they're also not just for those students, but they're just a great general help around the school. The teacher aides really are fantastic. And what is key to Milpera is this idea of volunteers. And volunteers allow for us to have one-on-one reading, one-on-one writing, and classroom support from these volunteers. And we've got, I think, about 200 odd? More than 150 volunteers every week that come through Milpera on different days to help kids, whether it's one-on-one reading, writing. And it allows us to help with this whole establishment of norms and appropriate school and classroom behaviour. So we got this consistent kind of behaviour management guideline by this student-centred kind of approach that we can help kind of bring the best out in them. So I'll just hand back to Julie, who'll kind of talk a little bit more about Milpera.
I say always that this is a great luxury, our student-centred approach, because we get to decide what our students need to know, what we need to teach them to grow their English to the level that they need to be successful in high school. We're not bound by the Australian curriculum and racing through at a Year 9 level. So I always think we're very lucky at Milpera. So again, we say it's very targeted, and we are building the bridge for where the students are headed next, because very much so we're about preparing the students for high school. And we know that that can't happen just because of a good education or good English. We know that we need good settlement, and we've got Jamie, who's in the room, who's part of our art and music therapy program, which is a very big part of our success story. We're lucky enough to be able to offer that. Just quickly going through, as you probably can already anticipate, the students who are at Milpera, who we have, is very much dependent on federal government politics. And at the moment, the school is nearly 30% Congolese. This time, 3 years ago, it was 50% Somali. But the Somalis are unable to get their exit visas out of Eritrea, even though the Australian government has said, yes, you can come. Unfortunately, wherever they are, that government's saying they can't leave. So we know that there's people, that the groups of people could change at any time, and we need to be prepared for that in terms of our bilingual aides. One of our big issues here is we do employ the bilingual aides to teach to support all of the different languages. And some of the students may speak between 1 and 5 languages, or they may speak, we may have 2 Karen speakers in the school. If we're using a model of equity, how do we make sure that we deliver some cultural and language support to the 2 Karen speakers compared to the 85 Congolese speakers that we might have in the school? And that's a really big challenge for us, but we have more recently developed little protocols around that so that we make certain that those groups are represented in the school. So our classrooms are the most amazing and special places. We have great challenges, but with the strategies and support, the coaching and mentoring, our teachers and our students rise to those challenges. And I suppose the first thing that we have to do is create that shared culture of learning where everyone's on a different deal. And when people first arrive at the school, they're like, please explain the deal. And we say, we can't do it today. You'll have to wait a week or two. Because a student who's come with a full education and a student who's come with a big life experience and a little education have very different needs in the classroom. One might be a great speaker of English and one might be a great writer of English. We declare our strengths, we declare the things that we're working on and build a culture of what we all need to do together to grow, to be successful together. So it's a very collaborative approach where those things are actually declared and acknowledged as strengths rather than hiding our weaknesses. We declare what we need support with. Cultural mistakes are okay. I know I've made hundreds of them since I've been at Milpera. I've been there for 14 years. I'm still making them. And for those second language specialists in the room, we use a communicative approach to language learning. So I suppose underpinning all of this and leading into Margaret she's going to talk about belonging again in a minute. We know that we have more in common than we have that is different, and this activity can work as a classroom activity as well at Milpera. It doesn't need to happen with students who, when we meet up with different schools. So this learning and thriving thing that we keep talking about, what did it look like? How did we lead and implement it? And how did we recruit the stakeholders and the staff? Lots of questions. We are going to answer those for you over the next 15 minutes. I want to, I suppose, give you an intro into how this project got started. We met this wonderful man called Terry Jantz, and he's now the principal of Curramundi State School. And we ran into him. We really liked the way he talked about social and emotional learning in classrooms. And he introduced us to this way of looking at our work, not the way of the leaders looking at the work, but the way of all stakeholders, all staff looking at the work they do in schools. And he categorised it quite simply using three things. What are we doing well? Or what are you doing well? What is not going well? What is still in development? And what we did was we started this project. We said to Terry, would you come to the school and run a professional learning community to help us determine what we need to do next? And we determined from that we needed to develop a more positive youth culture. And Terry ran that little professional learning group by bringing a very strong knowledge of the literature, academic justification and an evidence base to the work that we were doing. And just to show you quickly, he had a whole lot of things that were universal in all schools, little sentences, and he asked us to sort those sentences into what we're doing well, what we are not doing well, and what is still in development. And it was done very collaboratively amongst all staff, and we came up with some very big commonalities. And the one big commonality was the positive youth culture, and out of that, learning and thriving was born. Just to cut short, we found within this Learning and Thriving project that there were 4 key things that we wanted to work on, or that were important to a school. Joyous classrooms, teaching social and emotional skills like empathy, that's next year's presentation, that's very big, positive peer culture, and building a sense of belonging. We decided that we already did building a sense of belonging really well, and what we needed to do was to make our classrooms collectively and consistently more joyous. So Marg's going to start with what we did well, which was building a sense of belonging. I'll hand over to Marg. There's the tick for doing belonging really well.
So good morning or good afternoon, and it's lovely to be able to talk about Milpera because it is, a place where I've also worked for quite a while, and I think we saw in the beginning the sense of belonging that some of the speakers have. You heard their speaking about how they felt comfortable there, what is belonging to you, and I'd just like to talk a little bit more about how we build a sense of belonging and why it's important. So, I think to be able to learn and thrive, you have to be open or available for learning. And that sense of belongingness is something that can help students to become open for learning. As Oliver said, a lot of our students have come from a traumatic or dysfunctional country, family. They've had a long journey. A sense of belonging and connectedness can help them to get ready for learning. And as well as all the other support systems that we have, I feel that once they connect with their school, with their class, with their colleagues, their peers, their teachers, those positive relationships are very important in their openness for learning. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about what connectedness looks like at our school, what worked for us, and to put forward some of the ideas that are embedded within our intensive English language program. And if you have any questions, we will have a question period at the end, hopefully, or we can talk at lunch. So what is belongingness? Oliver referred to this, and I think, you know, we all have a feeling for it. We all have an understanding of what it means. But for our students, we try to encourage that commitment, and in the school context. We very much focus on engagement and how students can form positive relationships. And we talk explicitly about school values. Students come to understand and work with our values that we talk about in the classroom. And the promotion of a positive school culture is such a factor in being able to get that connection with school, with community. One of the things that I took away from the Positive Schools Conference, again, echoes those positive relationships which I mentioned, but it also is important to acknowledge the students' strengths and expertises. And one of the things that we like to do in our classroom is, you know, to start off with asking the students about some of the things that we're going to talk about. And, you know, just a very simple example, we might be doing a novel about, you know, sort of crocodiles or something. And you might have a student in your class who's actually seen or been frightened by a crocodile, or you might have a student who, you know, saw them in the river near their house every day, or, you know, just find out what your students know and what their experience is and use that as the jumping point into the learning that you want to do in the classroom. The other thing that Helen Street taught me, and she was one of the presenters at the Positive Schools Conference, is that it's not all about the end product, it's about the process of learning and engaging the students and scaffolding their learning step by step, and that's very important at Milpera. And Julie's going to talk more about the positive classroom pedagogy and how that fosters positive student engagement. And I can only echo again, you know, the positive relationships and the rapport and how important that is in the process of connectedness for the students in the class and at the school. So just to summarise there, and Julie's going to pop in and support some of these points. We very much promote a culture of trust and respect. And we also, as I pointed out with the classroom experts, we encourage a culture where we learn from each other. The students and the teachers learn from each other. And that's really important to acknowledge those links. And I'll just say the photographs at the bottom show the explicit language that we showcase in all our classrooms and in our administrative and office spaces. And it's part of the consistency of the language that Julie would like to say a little bit more about.
So during this project, it came out that we really needed to have consistent language, but we also needed to have shared understandings of what this language means. So these things are now explicitly taught to our students. The other thing that we realised was that we needed our staff to have consistent ways of speaking to our students. And schools have always been these funny institutions where they had these special ways of speaking to students that don't exist in any other place or in any other time. And I quote, and it is actually a person who I'm very fond of, used to come in and say, "Oh, that kid's a waste of space." Changing the ways teachers talk about students is not simple. School leaders can't go up and call people. It creates an awful space to work. So we are going to talk at the end of this session about possible ways of changing the ways that we view and talk about students, and ensuring that teachers and everyone who enters, everyone in the office, anyone who comes across a student has a shared and very respectful way of speaking to students that would be appropriate in any setting, in a family or in a workplace. I always think schools have kind of seen themselves as outside that, where there was lots of yelling, and if you spoke to anyone in your workplace with yelling at somebody, you might immediately be removed from that workplace. So we've really tried to work very hard on that. So the explicit teaching of that goes on in classrooms, but it also goes on in our professional development. So moving now to talk specifically about joyous classrooms. And here's our wonderful staff who are deeply committed to improving their practice. Everybody loves our school, and even more than that, they love the students who are at our school, and all strive to grow knowledge and understanding of how best we can teach our very special students. And it was from the staff that we were fortunate enough to drive this project, because they wanted it. Here's a lovely matrix made by Margaret. Now, this project's been going since 2016, and I think when you're implementing things in schools, people say, "Oh, we started that last year and everyone's doing it now, that's done, tick." That's not the case. It takes a long time to make certain that something's sustained, and then you get new staff, and then you have to make certain that you're sharing the practice with them. As we were looking through this presentation, Marg said, don't forget to tell everyone that these were the joyous classroom activities. And we kept making this distinction when we ran this project of saying we had joyous classroom activities and we had joyous pedagogy, that the engagement of learning, the joy of learning, if you could truly engage students, created fantastic and happy and joyous learners as well. So it did have two parts to it. Back to Terry Jantz, this is the quote from Adele Diamond that underpinned everything that Terry brought to this idea of joyous classrooms. And I'll just read it. "More learning occurs in a joyous classroom where children feel safe, secure, and accepted, and where they feel the teacher sees them for who they really are and genuinely cares." Still got the same slide. Gee, we've got that twice. So just what I'm going to talk through now in the next couple of minutes is how we did this. And Marg said, make certain you put in a flow chart. So here's my flow chart. So we met Terry Jantz. We decided what we did really well, and we said, great, that's done, tick. We won't do that this year. What are we not doing well? Positive youth culture. We decided on that, and then we thought, how do we go forward? We started the professional learning community led by Terry Jantz. We read the literature, we discussed it every second Tuesday, and we decided where we'd go forward. Those findings were shared by the teachers at the Twilight PD. From there, we decided we needed another PLC to start to enact what we'd found. It's great to talk about it. We all love theory. It keeps me awake at night sometimes, the theory, when it connects with what I really believe. So then we started another PLC which really honed in on that practice, and it was the Joyous Classrooms practice. And that went for a term or a semester, where we decided we could self-select into a group and work on coming up with practical things that were going to make a difference in the school. Once we'd done that, we again delivered the strategies at our Twilight PD. People loved it. The feedback was fantastic. We always ask for PD on our feedback on our PD. They loved the joyous strategies or the activities, and they loved the joyous pedagogy. That was last year. At the end of last year, we said, how are we going to sustain this? We went back to our findings and said, now we're doing empathy. So this year we've done implementing teaching students empathy, which we're not presenting today, and is an extremely challenging one to think about teaching to students, and even as teachers thinking about what really is empathy. So that was the process that we followed. Just to talk further about the Joyous Classroom PD, or the PLC, these were the things that, the practical things that people could self-select into. Teaching gratitude, the ways of being at Milpera, which was that shared language, being ready, kind, respectful and hardworking. Positive and joyful classroom talk, which we are going to share with you today. That idea of all teachers are on board with the ways of talking to students. Positive showcase for student work. Sometimes this was just the most simple package where people actually went out, bought the display cabinets and showcased the work, but it made it happen. Purchasing and resourcing for Joyous Classrooms as well. More resource, I suppose, more framing to display the work. With the showcasing, people they actually offered to go and buy ways you could showcase stuff in your classroom. You could go and see our staff and they would say, here's the 5 things, do you want the order for this? So it actually just put a lot of energy into making this whole Joyous Classrooms happen. And always we're fortunate, every term we have what we call our Twilight PD. It's scheduled in our calendar. It runs from 3 till 6. And these then provide the vehicle for structuring up our professional development program through the year. We have had new school leaders come in and say, hey, listen, why don't we get it all done? And we say no, because we can't drive a strategy through the year that enables us to deliver this practice. Right, we're up to the activities, and Marg and Oliver are going to act this one out. We thought we'd introduce a bit of drama into this presentation, but just really, I suppose I want to emphasise context here, and I want to emphasise that this worked really well because it wasn't like people had to have a school leader saying, this is Milpera and this is how we speak here, because it would be too transactional. This became teachers talking about the right language that was right for our students and the trauma backgrounds that they come from. So can I hand over to you, Marg and Ollie?
So guys, this is an example. So you get a chance to look at another scenario and fix the language of the rest. So we're just going to demonstrate probably the way we would not like to do that. That's just our context. So it's very common behaviour you might have in your school: uniforms, shoes, appropriate footwear, and kids forgetting to inform.
Oliver, you're wearing the wrong shoes again. Why are you doing this?
Couldn't find one.
But this is not the first time. This is not a good reason. You need to be more organised, Oliver. What will you do when you go to high school? Getting in trouble every day. Staying at lunchtime is punishment. That might help you to remember it. If you do it again, you may have to send it to the deputy.
Okay, so you can see just the kind of shame that a student might feel and from background kids, that's obviously not a good idea to have these my feelings. Particularly when you think about it, we're only the right foot where it's important, but how can we improve on that scenario to make it a little bit more friendly?
So we'll model a different way of looking at that situation, and then as Oliver said, we'll set up another scenario for you to work through if you'd like to. So in my class, in Oliver's class, we would, at the beginning of the term, we get new students who would outline the appropriate clothing to wear at school, and they'd do a job in the classroom with a big tick for the correct clothing footwear and a cross for the clothing footwear is unacceptable. And so
step might be, so to just on from that, is that you praise if the kids who are wearing the correct. Oh, great. We see 14 people who've got, or 13 students in class wearing the correct touch shoes, which is very bad. Does make the person who's like not aware of our shoes conscious of that. Oh wait, I might be one that they're talking about.
Then the teacher could quietly say to that student, just say something like, "Oh, you're wearing the wrong shoes." Okay, well, unfortunately, we really need to put shoes for science. It's a safety issue. So if you can't really do the reason why you need the shoes, ask for them to ask for what shoes to wear. So let's move forward to that. And we did have a situation where we had a teacher's assistant come to all our classes and checking, like the kids who had the correct shoes. And, we would actually say, "Oh, today, everyone with the correct shoes, fantastic." And I'm not sure, was there a real
There may have been.
I think it was a race to see who could get the full correct on before.
So there was a real emphasis on the positive to conform.
Ollie, before we go on, can I just say one thing? Again, I just want to really re-emphasise that these scenarios quite possibly won't work in your school, and these are very context-driven at Milpera to show you. This is the work that we did with our staff. We actually did a longer activity where they would rewrite them, which we are going to let you have a go at. But it is very context-driven for Milpera.
So this next one's about chewing gum. Every school kind of seems to have rules about chewing gum in school, like that, in the classrooms. So this is a model of what we would think is appropriate for our context. And just think of ways that you guys might improve the dialogue. What would you, how would you change? You guys have seen the model. What would you change?
been teaching since the 80s, you've probably had that conversation.
That's probably never been a rule that you actually have to create a tissue because you don't need to have it in the first place.
Yeah.
So that rule wasn't even there, which made it a rule as well.
Ollie, we're 5 minutes, so just sort of declaring out here.
So this is how we came up with okay. Again, it's kind of like, it turns around to start right forward, says, okay, so this is an opportunity for all students who are actually going to put the thing. So even it's not just, you might have seen one, but we'll know that can't think that somehow they just went over pretty amazingly, pretty sometimes. So another one is kind of non-verbal kind of strategy. So look at the students quietly, close the mouth, okay, and like when they actually realize, oh yeah, okay, thanks, okay, and it's the same students consistently. So that's when it's kind of like, okay, this is now the next level. Okay, we've talked the whole class, done the non-verbal, and now you're going to calmly speak the whole class about the rules, the importance of just out of school. Okay, and at the end you can say, I need everyone who has chewing gum, put it on chewing gum. Okay. So again, it's kind of a general instruction, not specific to individual student. And yes, that is much more time consuming than the first approach, however, the benefits are much, can't be overstated. So we're on to our final activity now.
We are. We've got 4 minutes. 3 minutes.
Okay,
3 minutes.
Julie and Margaret can bring the first activity. Okay, so this is the last activity, and it's about gratitude. And then what are you thankful for? And we want to ask you, what are you thankful for at your school? Okay, it can just be one word. It could be one thing, it could be a person. Okay, and then we're going, once you think of that, we're going to then go up into a circle, 2 circles, and share that sense of gratitude with the other person, with another person, and rotate through. Hopefully there's enough of us we can get through everyone. So let's see if you guys can jot down what are you thankful for at your school?
As soon as you've written your word, you come out, we can sort of start to make a circle. Some people may have done a donut circle, just to show you how it works. You want to use it in your school, your organisation, so like that. Donut circles, what's going on? I don't think so.
So I think where I said the inside people's, you don't need to move. The people on the outside will need to rotate. Okay. Inside circle here. Some of the faces are.
Just stay there. Just over there. You can face me. One do you want to play the game? And just you go in the middle as well.
One more here, Jamie.
Okay. We get one more here. Right. Is everyone facing somebody?
Beautiful. Yep. Okay, we're more up on.
You're facing each other as well. Up with the actual organizer. Julie, do you want to?
I'm Dave.
Oh, Jamie. All right. So we're just going to call it every 10 seconds. We're going to move. So we tell each other that we're grateful. Let's go. Okay, everyone move.
Sorry.
everyone gets to hold the floor, not just the leader or the person in charge. It means everyone can share. You can use this for sharing your own ideas. And so we are finished.